Thank you so much. How are you doing? I put the mint in just at the last minute there, so I'm just going to have to suck for a wee minute until it goes away. Oh God, it's a wee hot mint as well. Nothing worse than a hot Marks and Spencer's mint when you've got your mask on. So if you go to the doctor now, they just prescribe that and it clears absolutely everything in you. In the spirit of the panto season that is upon us, my speech is indeed behind me. I've just shrugged it out like my maths homework from up the back of my trousers. Keynote speaker on the last day. As I was arriving, I saw the people who were leaving in the lift. And when they saw me, they left even faster. So I'm very, very glad to see all of you who are here. I just wanted to start maybe with a little, just to reassure Susan that you're not going to have to worry doing your pestle analysis. I'm not going to mention any of those things. I think you're safe there. You're not going to have to count. I just want to do a quick taxonomy of place, just for the purposes of what I'm about to say. In this next 20 minutes, when I say this place, lowercase, I mean the Titanic Quarter. When I say this particular place, I mean obviously the building where we are. When I say this place, capital P, I mean the city of Belfast. And when I say this fucking place, I mean Belfast on a particularly bad day. So this place, lowercase, this Titanic Quarter, is the place historically that gives this place, capital P, simply Belfast, its particular cast and purpose. This place, lowercase, is formed from mud dredged from the estuary, at whose narrowest end, a few hundred yards south of here, was to be found the ford around which the first human settlement grew and out of which the name Belfast itself evolved. This place was home to a people's park with a replica of the Crystal Palace, to be found in another place out along the loch and across the Irish Sea. This place was, for a century, the epicentre of the shipbuilding industry. And this place has, since the start of our own overheating century, been the epicentre of the filmmaking industry, the fintech industry, the tourism and the conference industry. And this place is now a place where we come to talk about place. Serpent, here comes your tail. Open your mouth wide. I love this place, all T's and P's capitalised until further notice. I love this place. I can't wait to get out of this place. This place has been the making of me. This place has many times threatened to be the death and might yet be. The hotel across the plaza from this particular place, formerly the Harland and Wolff drawing office, has a photo on the wall at the foot of one of its stairwells from the 8th of August 1961. The Queen and Prince Philip meeting shipyard workers, among whom at that time was numbered my own father, who wasn't yet my father, not quite. If I thought I could have got away with it, I would have unscrewed it and brought it across here to show you. But let me offer you, and not I hope entirely randomly, this snapshot instead, in visual and in lexical form. Did that just appear as I said? Let me offer. Just like that's amazing. So it's just gone 8, the final Friday night in February, the 28th, 2020. And I'm in the Crescent Arts Centre, a grade B1 listed Victorian building and former girls' school, not much more than half a mile from Belfast City Hall, at the Bradbury, that word again, place, Bradbury Place end of University Road. What I would call the bottom, though in polar terms, it's the top, the apex even, north to the south, that is the fork, a couple of hundred yards away, of University Road into Stranmillis Road on the left and Malone Road on the right. My own school gates hard by. I am more specifically at the ground floor bay window of the Crescent's Pantry Cafe and Kitchen, having just stepped out of an event. The Seamus Heaney Centre presents Folk in the Cube Theatre down the accessibility ramp towards the rear of the building. I am the director of the Seamus Heaney Centre at Queen's University Belfast, and every month we have a Seamus Heaney Centre Presents event, and they're always themed, and we always have one word, and if possible, one syllable, and if possible, just 4 letters. So we were doing folk that night, and our next one is next Thursday, just before Halloween, which we're calling Boo. 3 letters, but there is also an exclamation mark. So, and every time you even look at the word boo, you have to jump. So we're going to do boo. But we were doing that night. We were doing the Seamus Heaney Centre Presents Folk. I was then a little raw. The Presents resident DJ, Michael Staley, by day the programmer of the nearby Queen's Film Theatre, has just played Joe Holtaway's aching, stripped-back acoustic guitar and violin cover of Idol's rousing hymn to unity and citizenship, Danny Nedelko, My Blood Brother is an Immigrant, a Beautiful Immigrant. I heard the Holtaway version for the first time on BBC Six Music the Sunday before last as I drove through this place, having just been in this particular place buying a voucher for my brother's birthday. Heard it and nearly crashed the car. I'm told Dusty Springfield nearly crashed her car the first time she heard the Pet Shop Boys, West End Girls. And if it's, that's not West End Girls, Pet Shop Boys, these West End Girls, no, wait a minute, I've just gone, it's West End Girls. Got lost there. Pet Shop Boys and West End Girls by Pet Shop Boys. And if it's good enough for Dusty Springfield to crash her car, it's good enough for me. The song, Danny Nedelko, as done by Joe Holtaway, doesn't exist in any physical format. But Michael Staley helped me track down Joe Holtaway, and got hold of an MP3 file, which he's just played, not once, but twice. Fear leads to panic, panic leads to pain, pain leads to anger, and anger leads to hate. 2 mornings ago, I walked with a close friend who knows it very well and writes it even better along London's Brick Lane, a name I'd always thought would be perfectly at home here in Belfast. And I had a flashback as we wended our way through the grocers and mercers and haberdashers to what were always referred to as the good shopping streets of my childhood. The Shankill Road, the Woodstock Road, Sandy Row, another former brick manufacturing site as it happens, the mouth of which I am staring into now from the window of the Crescent Arts Centre, which is the only reason I can think of for me taking out my phone. The time bar tells me it is precisely 8:03 p.m. and holding it up to the right-hand pane and pressing down on the camera screen's white circle with my thumb. It's dark outside, of course, or as dark as cities go, but I get, between me and Sandy Row, the Crescent's forecourt, cement brick sets and pavers, a couple of picnic-style tables with benches, and a curious blue object rising up 5 feet from the ground like a periscope, bordered by a sparse hedge intertwined with waist-high railings. I get across 4 lines of road, sloping away to the right in Bradbury Place, more railings, rising almost to head height at the lower end of the slope. Set atop a hewn stone wall, the boundary of King William Park, Belfast's smallest, which curves back on itself, forming a sort of promontory where University Road and the Lisburn Road, an alternative route from south to north, converge. It's the final few yards of the Lisburn Road, or if you prefer, the first, that Sandy Row opens onto. I get the headlights of a car emerging, fitted in the flat surface of the image on screen between the tip of the promontory and the blue periscope. a single red tail light next to it going in. I get an impression of the lights of the Eurospar that occupies the corner of Sandy Row and Bradbury Place, and I get full square and well-defined the two-storey stucco house that occupies the opposite corner, where in the three-dimensional world Sandy Row meets an angled street built up on only one side, whose much lower ground level can be inferred from the fact that a car roof, visible through all those railings, it's actually on the Lisburn Road, appears to come up to the door lintel. A sign next to an upper window on the second house along reads, or it would read if I had the power to bring it into focus, Malone Place. The rest of the street shades into obscurity. Actually, it shades into a reflection of me, hard against the left edge of the frame. A bare interior light bulb, likewise reflected level with my temple, looking like the real-world counterpart of my bright idea to take the photo, at almost the exact point where the houses, they date from the 1870s, give way to a larger building, squarish and flat-roofed. This is, or was, Malone Place Maternity Hospital. And this is where, the 1961 day after the Queen and Prince Philip visited Harland and Wolff, I was born. I like to think they'd just nipped in to wish the man who was soon to be my father well. I didn't know when I took this photograph, 8:03 p.m, 20th of February 2020, that this was to be the last Friday night I would be out for the next 5 months. I didn't know then, and already it seems incredible that I really truly didn't, none of us did, that our physical worlds were about to shrink, even as the virtual world expanded. The next Seamus Heaney Centre event presents We Did, May Day, it was called Help, took place on a thing I'd never heard of in February called Zoom. The readers and performers recording themselves on their phones, or in the case of Joe Holtaway, who would track down, getting a friend to film him from what we'd learnt to call a safe social distance as he went about his London neighbourhood delivering food to vulnerable and isolated refugees. I didn't know then either that I would spend the hours that I eventually did contemplating that spur of the moment Danny Nedelko Brick Lane propelled photograph, mining it for memory and association. My old school, King William Park, where I used to love to go with my mum, even though there was nothing to do in it except stand at the prow and pretend I was sailing a ship onward into the city centre, onward into the future. So that it seemed at moments that I was passing the entire lockdown right there. I was reminded of Pahom, the discontented landowner character in Tolstoy's famous story, whose life becomes a scramble for ever more land, more land, through deals and alliances and stratagems, until finally, having arrived at a distant tribal homeland out in the vastness of the steppes, he's made an offer beyond even his dreams. Whatever ground he can cover on foot in the course of a single day, marking as he walks with a spade, will be his, provided, that is, he returns to this exact starting point before nightfall, which, after pushing himself on and on, running finally, throwing away his coat, his boots, his flask, his cap, everything but the marking spade, he succeeds just in doing, and promptly falls down dead, thus answering the question posed in the story's title: how much land does a man need? Enough to bury him, 6 feet from his head to his heels. I felt, the more I looked, and as the coronavirus numbers grew, that I had trailed my marking out spade around for the best part of 60 years, only to come back, without being aware of it, to the very beginning, head overlaid on hospital, which might also be the very end. This was my portion, or at least my point of entry to the world and to the city that was my first experience of it. It was all right there, or the contours of it were, the day I left Malone Place, forever after the hospital where our Glenn was born, in my parents' next-door neighbour Sid McCormick's brother-in-law's borrowed Austin car. It wasn't new and it wasn't big, my mum says of the car, but it was a lot more comfortable coming home than it was going in. How far could I go, I wanted to know, if I never again got out of this place? As it happens, a significant part of Belfast's history as well as my own flows through the frame of that photograph. Malone Place follows the line of a Bronze Age track down from the Antrim Plateau across the Lagan Valley to that ford I mentioned right at the start. Long, long, long before that even, a lake of ice covering the whole of the valley came to an end where the ground began to rise at a geological feature known as Malone Ridge, precisely where the Crescent Arts Centre stands. The first road connecting the town of Belfast to Dublin came along the ridge and dived down Sandy Row. That Eurospar occupies the site of a toll house, a little collapsed-looking building with windows facing in three directions that most resembled something out of Hans Christian Andersen that was demolished in September 1961. I overlapped with it by 1 month and 13 days. As for King William Park, well, anybody who has spent any time here will not need the significance explained to them. In the early summer of 1690, the army of the newly crowned third English monarch of that name, until recently the unregal William of the Dutch House of Orange, landed at Carrickfergus, just up the coast from this place, uppercase, this place lowercase, still then being substantially non-navigable mud, and marched his army south. On their first night, history, or maybe it's legend, has it, they camped on the Malone Ridge at the foot of the then Dublin Road. I think when I was young, I thought they actually camped right in King William Park itself. In fact, I don't think I fully banished that from my mind until 5 years ago when I visited the place at Valley Forge outside Philadelphia, where in 1777 the American Continental Army pitched camp. It was about 3,500 acres. King William Park is about 350 square feet. Wherever they camped that night, next day they rolled up their palliasses and carried on, arriving eventually at the Boyne River outside Drogheda, where on the first day of July, the 12th in the revised calendar, they fought a battle that some would say still hasn't finished. I searched and searched that photo of the Queen and Prince Philip visiting the shipyard, by the way, but I couldn't see my father at all. I can just imagine the Queen and Prince Philip's disappointment if he wasn't there. For a man, in fact, who spent 85 very vivid years in this place, he's left very little visible trace. Although I can still spot here and there, at the end of someone's front garden, the railings he made in his spare time back in the 70s for a bit of extra cash, which is maybe a more useful kind of memorial. I remember him the first time he came to this particular place, telling me that all he saw were ghosts, not, as you might imagine, of the people who lost their lives when the big White Star liner went down, but of the people who built that ship, one of whom was still working in the yard when he started at the end of the 50s, and all the ships that followed, right down to his own day. And now he's one of the ghosts too. I don't need the added visual metaphor of that snapshot from inside the Crescent, like an illustration from the Pan Book of the Unexplained, to remind me that I am, at 60, beginning to fade from the picture myself. 10, 20, 30, if I'm lucky, years from now, I'll be out of it altogether. All that will be left of me will be my words, and who's to say that they will last even as long as my dad's railings, or be as much use. And I mean, it's not as if there'll be any shortage of words to replace them. And that If it did come out sounding a little glummer than I had intended to, I'll try and offset that by offering a last image, and it's going to have to be entirely lexical. I was afraid when I was trying to make this image of being caught taking photographs. 30 years ago, next month, November 1991, I was on the Disneyland Paris, then called Euro Disney building site in Marne-la-Vallée. I was, to be precise, undercover on the Disneyland Paris building site in Marne-la-Vallée. The word that had reached me being that not only was Disney security really tight, but its lawyers were really, really litigious and sensitive to the leak of any inside information. I actually had a tape recorder on the inside pocket of the donkey jacket that, along with a hard hat and boots, had been loaned to me by one of the Belfast workers who was there. And I walked around for a week, kind of speaking down the inside of the collar of the donkey jacket, describing everything I saw, and then going home and drawing these maps of everything I'd seen. Somebody asked me afterwards, would it not have just been easier to get a job on the building site? Yes, getting a job on the building site would have been easier, but then I would have had to work instead of just skulk. So I skulked for a week. I had in mind writing a novel that looked skeptically at Walt Disney's obsession with building the perfect city, for which the theme parks were, in some respects, just testing grounds. Looked skeptically at the choice of that particular place in Marne-la-Vallée as the exact centre of Europe, even as the Eastern Cold War borders on which such a geometry was predicated had already begun to crumble, and by 1991, in former Yugoslavia, had been replaced by the beginnings of an all-out civil war. While I was there, the Croatian town of Vukovar fell to the Serbian JNA after a siege that lasted 87 days. A town of 60,000 people fell. Talk about adjusting your sense of perspective. I was not well disposed to Disney or its theme parks, but I couldn't help but be in awe of the workers, men and women from all over Europe who were actually building the place. Some of those from Northern Ireland were former employees of the Harland and Wolff shipyard, whose jobs had disappeared in the 1980s when shipbuilding in this lowercase place went into decline. Some of them were engaged at Euro Disney in building a shipwreck for Skull Island. What more eloquent commentary could you ask for on the transformation of the global economy in those years? Except, get this, the builders I spoke to a woman and a man, loved it, took immense pride in what they were creating. I wrote a newspaper piece at the time saying that all cities would in time become theme parks. This entire reclaimed from the mud place was pretty much derelict, and I suggested it could be revived with the building of a replica Titanic. I wasn't a million miles out, but I am several hundred miles from where I meant to be. Each contractor working on Disneyland Paris or Euro Disney had a compound on the outer edge of the site, from which properly maintained roads led into the various lands that would, when the battalions of builders had finally decamped, make up the park. By the time I arrived, though, other informal lines of communication had opened up, little tracks and lanes between the compounds themselves, or between the compounds and the opportunistic traders who had pitched up selling all the things that tens of thousands of women and men working for months away from home might want to see them through their nights and days. The workers had painted signs on some of these tracks, naming them after places close to their heart. I walked along Sauchiehall Street, I walked along an O'Connell Street, and I walked along a sandy row. I made a tongue-in-cheek, or perhaps I mean tail-in-cheek reference earlier on to the Ouroboros, the ancient and mystical symbol of the serpent that consumes itself. It represents a great many things, some of which you might be advised to Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo with your safe search on. But one of the more benign things it does symbolize is continuity and regeneration. Just beyond the right-hand edge of the frame of the photograph I took inside the Crescent is a North African grocery store, opened maybe the year before last. There's another a couple of hundred yards away where the final building on Bradbury Place curves round into Botanic Avenue, facing down Donegal Pass, which over the course of the past couple of decades has become Belfast's own Chinatown. The story of this place, capital T, capital P, will be carried on in part by the children of people who have come from, in some cases, been displaced from other places. Places as saturated with history and memory as King William Park is for me, as this particular place was for my father. A little of which, that newly imported history and memory, will weave its way into the fabric of Belfast's future. It's been happening since the Bronze Age. The people who, I don't know what to give this building, 100, 150 years maybe? The people who at some date in the future will overlap by a month and 13 days with this particular place before it too is pulled down will have stories to tell as unimaginable to us as the texture of our here and now, our wonderful forward-looking Beyond Conference 2021 will be to them. Quaint, they will say. They thought they were so modern. And bless them, they hadn't a fucking clue. I told a partial lie earlier. I said that in 10, 20, 30 years from now, maximum, I would be out of the picture. In fact, if I have my way, I'm going to have my ashes scattered at the promontory of King William Park, where I used to pretend to sail a ship into the future. So not even the 6 feet that Tolstoy's character needed. This fucking place. You win. You have me forever.